Hello and a very warm welcome. This is the Ideas Factory. I am Naghma Sahar and joining me is Professor Pant. This week, the week that's just gone by, we saw the US Foreign Secretary visit India and China. Antony Blinken was here. China, meanwhile, welcomed a delegation of Taliban and not only welcomed, accorded a very warm welcome to Taliban. And it seems like the Taliban are China's new friends. On this episode, we will look at why, what is China's interest in being great friends with the Taliban. Along with that, we will also look at China's aggression or China's displeasure over the movement of the UK carrier group in the South China Sea. Which is contested by many countries. This China claims many parts of the South China Sea, and Afghanistan, of course, was top of the agenda on Antony Blinken's visit. We will look at all that in this episode of the Ideas Factory. A very warm welcome to you, Harsh.
Thank you.
Let's start with the visit of the Taliban delegation to China, and we saw that China more than welcomed the Taliban, and it looked like kind of in a hurry to accord legitimacy to the Taliban, and has called it a pivotal force. The welcome and the kind of talks that took place was almost like it would do with a delegation of a sovereign country, a legitimate delegation of a sovereign country. So this is very, very clear that China's intent is to play a bigger role in the future of Afghanistan, knowing that Taliban will have a very important role there. We do understand the economic interest that China has in the area, be it the BRI or the CPEC, also the geostrategic importance. So, how do we see this? China and the Taliban, that is, of course, a matter of concern while the violence is on the rise and the Taliban are actually wreaking havoc all around Afghanistan. China's new friendship or more closeness with the Taliban. How do you see this visit? And
Well, China clearly, Nagma, they are making their moves, and Afghanistan situation is so evolving so rapidly that every single regional player is interested and is trying to make sense of what is happening post American withdrawal. But I think we had the visit of the Pakistani foreign minister to China a few days before. The Taliban delegation came to China. So I think clearly there is a pattern emerging here. The idea that Pakistan and China are converging on perhaps what they see as an opportunity in Afghanistan post American withdrawal. During the visit of the Pakistani foreign minister, it was decided that the two countries would launch joint operations in Afghanistan. It's not entirely evident, clear what those joint operations can be, but certainly the idea that these would be operations aimed at driving out terrorists from Afghanistan, which sounds quite interesting. That you have here these two countries that are propping up a regime, that is almost that is imposing a terror-like situation in Afghanistan, and they are being welcomed. And the idea is that let Beijing and Islamabad or Rawalpindi uh, jointly manage this transition. I think China, for the moment, is saying big things, is saying a lot is promising a lot, but their aim is extremely narrow. Their aim is at the moment is to just protect their frontier with Afghanistan, to ensure that the negative externalities emerging from Afghanistan do not impinge on Xinjiang, and that's something that is understandable from their point of view, because that's their first priority. They do not want to see extremism rising. They don't want to see terror groups, which they claim to be terror groups, and bordering coming in from Afghanistan to Xinjiang and wreaking havoc there. And from their perspective, if this thing escalates, they will be really looking at a situation that can very rapidly get out of control. So for them, it is very important that Afghanistan situation potentially should be contained within Afghan borders. And Taliban at the moment, because on the west, in the West, in India, Taliban is not the Taliban story is not being bought. They are looking to countries like China, like Russia, of course, with Pakistani help, to gain legitimacy. And I think that is something that that the Talibani delegation went for into China. But Chinese actually are playing, it seems to me, a rather subtle game, because if you read the statement by the Chinese foreign minister, they actually are even today they are talking of all the stakeholders coming on board. that what they said was they expect Taliban to push the peace process forward and to bring all stakeholders on board, because I think Beijing recognizes that if all stakeholders are not on board, then the future of Afghanistan will be chaos, will be a civil war, which would not help Beijing. So I think we can discount everything else. For example, on on economy, on infrastructure. I don't think it matters at this stage, because clearly Taliban are saying a lot. Taliban in China even said that they believe in women's rights and human rights, which no one takes seriously. So I think for Taliban at the moment, it's not readily evident that economic development is their priority, that political stabilization is their priority. So what Chinese expect from Taliban, from a government in Afghanistan, is basically to ensure that the negative externalities emerging from Afghanistan do not come to China, do not come to Xinjiang, and they continue to control Xinjiang in the way they have, and they continue to moderate extremism there. So I think with that, they have reached a modus vivendi. I don't think Chinese are interested in very expansive footprint in Afghanistan at this stage, because of the costs that it will bring home to China. They are happy with what is happening. They are satisfied. If Pakistan can rein in Taliban, can bring in certain stability, can bring some kind of a stability to Afghanistan, it helps China. But I don't think Chinese are expecting too much, and therefore they are saying a lot. But I very much doubt that they would deliver anything on the ground, especially on economics, on infrastructure, on capacity building.
So you're saying basically they are safeguarding their own interests, and which is understandable looking at the situation in Xinjiang. And while there have been back talks, looks like, with countries like Iran and Russia, the Talibani delegation, the Taliban have deliberately, now it's apparent, it's evident, have attacked Indian journalists there. So the hostility that we are seeing towards India right now with the Taliban, as far as the Taliban is concerned. Now, when Antony Blinken, the US Foreign Secretary, visited India, there was a lot on his agenda. Of course, the Quad Summit is going to take place, so it was seen as a preparatory ground for that. And along with that, the Indo-Pacific policy, all of that. And China, of course, has been one of the co-drivers of the Indo-US partnership. But on this visit, what loomed large was Afghanistan again, because less than a month now that the US troops will be completely out of Afghanistan. What was the significance of this visit? The purpose of this visit now? He also visited China. How do we look at Blinken's visit, and what did we really gain out of, in terms of Indo-US relationship?
I think this visit tells us something about American foreign policy that has been quite evident for a while now. That irrespective of administrations, we are looking at a consolidation of Indo-US partnership across sectors, across domains, even in areas, for example, where there are potential challenges, and Afghanistan is one of them, where there has been a divergence between Indian position and what Americans are doing on the ground. Clearly, what this visit brought to the fore is the ability of the two sides to coordinate their actions, to converge on areas where potentially they can work, and also articulate or continue to articulate a vision for the future. We have seen a high level engagement from the Biden administration as far as India is concerned. Uh, President Biden himself bringing in with the leaders level summit of the Quad, ushering in a very new momentum in Quad. We had the Secretary of Defense visiting India in March, and now we have the Secretary of State visiting India, and clearly signaling that India will remain a priority, despite some apprehensions in some quarters that Biden administration may not be as warm to India as perhaps the Trump administration was. But I think the strategic logic of the engagement of the partnership is so strong that political differences in Washington do not actually impinge on the partnership at the moment. And the two sides have actually attained a level of maturity in the relationship where even difficult decisions are honestly addressed. So I think, when you look at Afghanistan, for example, this was an issue where there were a lot of concerns in India about what Americans are doing, why they are doing. So I think it was an important visit, which allowed Washington to share some of the thinking that they have. And if you look at the transcript of the statements that was made, the joint statement, the joint press conference, it was very clear that Americans are sending two messages: that they stand with India insofar as the legitimacy of Taliban is concerned, and that is where you need to juxtapose it with China, where Taliban are going to China and asking for legitimacy. Here, both India and America are in sync, saying that you cannot have legitimacy in Afghanistan unless you bring all stakeholders on board. So that's one important direction in which the conversation has moved. The other is Washington assuaging Indian concerns that they are moving out and they will have nothing to do with Afghanistan. Clearly, America is signaling, not only in India, Secretary Blinken said that, but you also have the Pentagon making it very clear that they intend to keep very close eyes on what Taliban are up to. We know that they have, air operations have been launched in recent weeks against Taliban by the Americans. So clearly, the counter-terror aspect of this of the American campaign in Washington will remain to a certain extent robust, and the engagement with India, insofar as Indian interests are concerned, America continues to see India as a very important partner in whatever happens in Afghanistan. So I think that's something that brought this discussion to an end, where there were many who were concerned about the growing divergence in the trajectories of India and the US in Afghanistan. But I think final point that I want to make is also about, there was a lot of discussion in India, in particular, about this issue of democracy and human rights.
Yes.
That this would be a challenge. And it remains to a certain extent. There are voices on both sides that want this issue to be addressed. But what we also saw was something very, very, very interesting this time, which I think is a step forward in the relationship. One, that America is willing to listen, and America is willing not, engage India in a tone which is not condescending. It is the idea that, look, India is a democracy, America is a democracy. Both are works in progress, as Anthony Blinken said. And India, on the other hand, remaining open to engaging on this subject. A lot of the times we have seen in the past that India has been shirking this subject, that this is a domestic matter, we don't want to discuss it. But I think this time India came out and swinging on the subject and said, well, it's a topic for discussion where both sides can learn from each other. And I think
Sure.
that shows you a trajectory in the relationship that is very mature and that is moving in a direction where even differences can be discussed openly and very productively.
All right, Harsh, but a very quick comment from you on this point itself. It's also said that probably it also shows that Biden administration is not shy of raising issues which India is not comfortable with. Secretary Blinken meeting the civil society, and another interesting thing, your comment on that, him meeting the representative of the Tibetan government in exile, sending a message to China here.
Yes, and I think, in a sense, this idea that he met members of the civil society and he met members of different religious groups. It was not simply that he was, responding to one particular group or the other. There were multiplicity of members from different groups present in that meeting. Again, in a certain way, it was a tribute to India's own democracy. That it looked, this is the way India operates. You have, persecuted Tibetans from China here, part of India. And I think
Right.
it was a message to China, of course, where India and America both seem to be converging and seem to be taking the Tibetan issue very seriously once again. And also, I think a signal that when it comes to engaging with India, domestic issues, of course, will play a role, but domestic issues will play a role in a certain context where cultural context also matters. That the fact that India has had such a rich diversity present in the country, which at times is even more profound than what you see in Washington, where the Americans continue to struggle with their own civil war legacy. But in India, we see how different religious denominations can actually come together and make Indian democracy more robust. So I think, in a certain way, it was a very interesting twist, or an interesting turn in Indo-US relationship, where even subjects which some would say were very sensitive at one point in time are no longer that sensitive, and both sides can be at ease in a relationship that is now becoming increasingly multidimensional.
All right, so that's a good thing. And a very final question on this episode of the Ideas Factory. We do not have much time. We will then move on to taking from audience question. Is about China's aggression in the South China Sea. We know a large part of the South China Sea is contested. Many countries take claim over areas that China calls its own. Now, the UK carrier strike group is sailing through the South China Sea and has made clear the intent to, carry out the freedom of navigation exercise through the South China Sea. The challenge to China's claim of sovereignty has angered China, as was expected. And South China Sea has always been a problem. How do we look at this?
Yes, I think, China was. There was. I think a few years back, or even till 2 3 years back, China was getting a bit blasé about its control over this domain. That at the end of the day, what China was arguing was, this is my domain, this is my sovereignty, and other powers are actually peripheral because they are small powers. You can Philippines can challenge you in an
Yes.
international court, but it's not binding. It can be pushed aside. I think now we are witnessing a more realpolitik approach to this question by Western nations, by more powerful nations, and I think that is stirring up some emotions in China about the possibility that this is becoming more of a problem now because countries do not recognize Chinese claims anymore, and they are willing to push the boundaries. UK would not have done that, say, 3 years back, 4 years back. UK is willing to put a carrier group there in the South China Sea to go. Americans are there doing, even as US British forces were there, were traveling through there. American forces are there for an exercise. So clearly, I think the strategic.
Yeah, your voice is breaking, but it's better now. You're saying that this is going to gain momentum, so China's aggression in that area will not be just left uncontested. There is a question from our audience, Akshay Sinha, who asks, given how China interferes in Jammu and Kashmir as well as in Arunachal Pradesh, what should be India's policy towards Tibet, Hong Kong, Xinjiang, Taiwan, areas which are sensitive to China? Also, should India foray into the South China Sea as part of the Quad?
My own sense is that as far as China is concerned, everything should be on the table because we are clearly, in a phase with our China relationship where our past policies are no longer working. So we are finding a new, or trying to find a new balance with China, and as we try to move towards that new balance, India should be challenging China on some of these fundamentals, and I think there is a movement in that direction. We are increasing our bilateral engagement with Taiwan. We are looking at the Tibet question. Mr. Modi's outreach to the Dalai Lama is an indication, and greater coordination with like-minded countries on these areas certainly remain a very valid point of inflection for India. But I think that the challenge will be that all these issues are part of a larger matrix, which is, how do we define the larger trajectory of India's foreign policy? And there, as we ask more questions, as we challenge the older assumptions that have on which we have built our China policy, I think we will see that on almost all of these questions, there is a greater diversity of views. There is a greater momentum to push in a direction that perhaps we had not in the past. So we are looking at a new, or we are trying to establish a new equilibrium with China. But as we do that, almost all these questions will once again be part of the Indian policy debate and discussion. They have not been resolved in the past, as we assumed that one China policy, for example, can be the only motto for India in going forward with its China policy. I think we are going to see a lot of challenge to that one China policy in the coming days and months if the present trends continue, if the present momentum in the downward slide in Sino-Indian relations continue. So I think everything is up in the air at the moment.
Present momentum, a downward slide in the India-China relationship, and while you say that another round of talk is still on, not much has been achieved as far as those talks are concerned, but we're trying to reach a new equilibrium with China. Thank you so much, Harsh, for that answer. We have time for these many questions on this episode, but we will take more questions next time. Thank you all for joining.